You know that feeling, right? A friend gets a shiny new car, or maybe your neighbor remodels their kitchen, and all of a sudden you start feeling this pressure, this little itch to upgrade, to spend, to keep pace. Well, it turns out that's a really powerful force, and it actually has a name. It's like you're on a treadmill. You're running faster and faster, spending more and more money, but you look around and it feels like you're not actually getting anywhere new. You're just trying to keep up. And there's a name for this whole thing. Researchers call it a spending arms race. It's this collective trap we all fall into. When one person spends more, it kind of raises the bar for everyone else. And the results? We all end up spending more and saving less without actually being any happier in the long run.
Okay, so what if there was a way to pump the brakes on this? Imagine a policy, a tax system, that instead of taxing what you earn, it taxed what you spend. And it did it progressively, so the more you spend, the more you're taxed. The whole idea would be to gently nudge us away from this spending race and back towards things like saving.
So that brings us to the big mystery we're going to unpack today. If a policy like this could, in theory, be a win-win for a lot of people, more efficient, maybe even more fair, then why do people often hate the idea? Well, the answer, it turns out, is deep inside our own heads. All right, to start cracking this case, we've got to look at our first clue. It's a concept called positional consumption, and believe me, it's the engine driving this entire spending race. The key thing to get here is that this kind of spending isn't really about how useful an item is on its own. It's all about the status it gives you. The value comes almost entirely from how it stacks up against what other people have. This quote just nails it. A nice suit isn't nice just because of the fabric or the cut. It's nice because it's the nicest suit in the room. It's all about the context, the comparison. And that's exactly what pushes us to keep spending more and more just to hold on to our spot in the pecking order. Okay, so we've got the behavior, but what's going on upstairs that makes us push back against a potential solution? Let's meet the prime suspects, a couple of hidden biases in our own brains. The researchers behind this study say it comes down to these two sneaky characters. First up, you've got status quo bias. Basically, our brains love keeping things the same. Any change, even a good one, can feel like a threat. Then you've got its partner in crime, loss aversion. This one's simple. Losing $100 feels way, way worse than the good feeling you get from finding $100. These two team up and make us automatically resist new ideas, especially when it comes to our money. So, to see if this theory was really what's happening, the researchers got clever. They set up a really cool two-part investigation to actually watch these biases in action. First up, they built a mini society inside a computer with 20,000 synthetic people to see how different things like how you explain the policy would change whether they'd accept it or not. Then they brought it into the real world with a questionnaire for actual people to see how we make choices about status when we're thinking about gains versus losses. So the investigation is done, the verdict is in, and honestly, the results are pretty eye-opening. Check this out. This is from the computer simulation. So on the left, you see this heat map that's almost all red and orange. That's a ton of resistance to the new tax. But now look at the right. All the researchers did was add some simple, easy-to-understand explanations about the policy. And boom, resistance drops like a rock. The colors shift way more towards blue, which means a lot more acceptance. So just how big of a deal was this shift? Well, it was a huge deal. We're talking double. Think about that for a second. In the simulation, acceptance of the policy literally doubled from a measly 11% all the way up to 22%, just by explaining it better. This is a massive clue. It suggests that a lot of the pushback isn't about the policy itself. It's our brain's default settings kicking in because we don't fully get it. But, that's a computer model. Does this framing effect really have that much power over actual living, breathing people? Well, let's look at what the questionnaire found out. Oh yeah, absolutely. It matters a ton. This chart is fascinating. When a choice was presented as a potential gain, that's the blue bars, people got really focused on their relative status. But when the very same choice was framed as trying to avoid a loss, the red bars, their priorities did a complete 180. Suddenly, they cared way less about status and way more about just getting the best possible outcome, no matter what their neighbor had. Our fear of losing is so strong it can actually short-circuit our obsession with status. Okay, so let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway from all of this? Why does it really matter? Yeah, because this is about so much more than just some obscure tax policy. This is really a lesson in how our minds work and how we make decisions every single day.
So let's break it down. What have we learned? First, we are just wired to compare ourselves to others. It's part of our DNA. Second, our brain's default settings, those biases, make us naturally fight against change, even if that change could be good for us. But third, and this is the really hopeful part, how you talk about an idea, how you frame it, can totally overcome that resistance. And that means that understanding these little quirks in our psychology is the absolute first step to creating smarter policies that people might actually get behind.
And that leaves us with a pretty deep question to chew on. If we know our brains can be so easily influenced by things like status and our fear of loss, how do we get better at making decisions, not just for our own bank accounts, but for everyone? It's definitely something to think about.